Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome along to the wilds of Suffolk. I'm out here yet again doing what I do, walking along in beautiful locations such as this, giving you my thoughts and opinions on things that are happening in the world and the public consciousness. If it's your first time here, welcome. This is what I do. I hope you enjoy it. If you're a returning subscriber, or 1,106 of you today, I think there is, welcome back. I'm still overawed by how many people join me for these walks. I'm not entirely sure whether people are joining me because they like the content or whether they're just watching my slow descent into madness. But either way, I'm pleased that you're here, so thank you one and all for being here. So today, by the title, it might be a little bit confusing, but I'm going to be examining today whether, well, the title first is intelligence or empathy. Now, I'm going to be examining whether there's a link between really highly intelligent people and high intelligence and a lack of empathy, and how that relates to what's happening in the world right now. So, welcome. Join me for this walk. So, as we look at the state of the world and what's happening in the world and how things are being run, it's pretty obvious that the world is being run by psychopaths, okay, and sociopaths. Now, we've heard a lot about psychopaths and sociopaths, but what does it really mean? You know, what is it at the end of the day? What does it mean, and how does that relate to anything, really? You know, so a psychopath, by the definition of how it's defined, is essentially, it boils down to they don't know the difference between right and wrong, lack of empathy, just the cold calculating. Doesn't matter. They don't care. It is, or they don't know the difference between right and wrong, and a sociopath knows the difference and doesn't care. Okay? That's essentially what it comes down to. The psychopath, a total lack of empathy for anything, anyone, and it's all about them, egocentric, the whole, you know, it's all about one single gold mind, and nothing else gets in the way. So, psychopaths running the world, and sociopaths. So psychopaths come up with a plan, because they're psychopaths, and it's total lack of empathy. So it is really geared towards, my plan is the best, and this is what we're going to do, and then sociopaths go and enforce it. Okay, so now that we have that, how do we get to this point where we have a bunch of psychopaths and a bunch of sociopaths running the world? I'm going to be doing a talk coming up in the near future. I've got something booked on the 25th. I'm going to be speaking to a man about something. I'm not going to give it away just yet because I've spoken about this before, and it's so hard to get someone to speak about the subject. But I'm going to be talking to someone on the 25th, and hopefully recording not long after, that will give you a bit of an insight into where we are and how we got here, which is a different path. I'm not even going to mention what it's about, okay? We're going to talk about that later in the month. But there's a whole pile of things that have trapped us in this reality, if you want to call it that. And it started a long time ago. Now, I don't know, for many of you who haven't been here on the journey, I'm going to give you a little bit of a story into my background to give you an idea of why I'm talking about this subject and how I fit into this. Okay, now to quote Ron Burgundy, I don't know if you know this, but I'm kind of a big deal. For those of you who don't know Ron Burgundy, don't worry. So when I was a child, many years ago, I was when back in those days, you used to do IQ tests. IQ is an intelligence quotient. For those of you who don't know, intelligence quotient. So it is a comparative about where you sit in by comparison to everybody else in the world. When you do the test, it's where you fit in the percentile of people who have high intelligence or low intelligence, or average. Okay, intelligence quotient, IQ. So when I was a kid, you used to have to do these IQ tests. I don't know whether they're still around because I'm not in school anymore, so I don't know. But back in those days, you did IQ tests and personality tests, and they always go together, IQ and personality, which we're going to get to soon as well. I'm going to explain that. Now, when I was a kid, very young, I did an IQ test, and apparently I scored very high on the IQ test, so they wanted to send me to a special school for gifted children. Now, my mum wouldn't allow it, but where would I be if she had? Maybe I would have been at the at the Xavier School for Gifted Children. Maybe I'd have superpowers. Maybe I'd be an X-Man. Mum, what have you done? But I am definitely a Generation X-Man. That's for you, Robert. So back in those days, they wanted to send me to a special school for gifted children, for, high intelligence, all that kind of jazz. My mum would not allow it, right? And I didn't understand back then. I have a better understanding of why now, but we're going to talk about that today. That's the whole reason I'm talking about this. So back in those days, they wanted to send me to a special school. And why? Why would they want to separate out the children at a high IQ from the others? Obviously, high IQ people get bored, going through the usual rigmarole of things that children study in school, and they understand it before everybody else does. So in my case especially, I used to cause a lot of trouble. I was bored. I was bored out of my mind. Most days I'm bored out of my mind because I need something constant in my brain carrying on to entertain me. If I don't have that, then who knows what's going to happen, and over the years, because of that, I need a constant, I have tried to drown it out with everything from alcohol to drugs, and, you name it, I've done it. I've talked about this many, many times in all my talks. I've done it all to try and drown out that noise, that constant need for input going into my mind. Now, that's a little bit of background about me, okay? So there's a reason I talk about this. It's not to big myself up and say, hey, I'm smarter than you. But what this can do, quite often what it does, is it creates an elitism about people who have a high intelligence or high IQ comparative to other people, okay? Now, this is what feeds into situations like we have now. You have a bunch of people who are highly intelligent or have a high IQ based on relation to other people, and based on the systems that we measure intelligence by, okay? Now, the problem with this whole IQ test is it is based in what they base intelligence on, your ability to sort of figure things out, okay? Now, that doesn't mean you're smarter. It means you can figure things out better than other people. Now, to go off on a little sidetrack here, there's a friend of mine who, by rights, by consideration of how we consider intelligence in this world, is deemed to be stupid, right? He can't read very good, he can't write very good, but I tell you what, give him some tools and some wood and some materials and he can build you anything you want. So, is he unintelligent? Probably not. But I saw a great quote as well, and it was like, if you judge a fish's ability to climb a tree, then that fish will always believe that it's stupid, right? So we're basing our worth, our what we're capable of, on these tests that are based in a system that they created. For what reason? Okay, so education. I've spoken about education many times before, and what education is, what it's about, and what it's for. And our education systems are not based on any kind of reality of what you need to survive in this world, to live, to thrive. It is literally, education systems were based around having people being able to be smart enough to run the machinery. And you were going to have some people who are slightly smarter doing the management positions, but just smart enough to run the machinery and no more. Because if you educated people enough to be able to replace the people at the top, then their positions would be tenable. Okay? So, this is, I know how crazy this sounds, but bear with me, okay? Now, think about it like how the world is set up, okay? It is a system of control from the top down, okay? And we're told what to think, what we're allowed to say, everything. We're told what the truth is constantly. You can't question it because, as I've said before, science is the new religion. If you dare to question the accepted scientific theory, it's heresy, goddammit, heresy, burn the witch. You cannot question science. It's much the same as religion was 1,000 years ago. If you question religion, it was like, how dare you? You're questioning the word of God that came from people's mouths. How dare you burn the witch? The Spanish Inquisition. But what was that all about? Now, I've got some talks coming up about Atlantis. I did one about Antarctica. I've got one coming up about Atlantis and Tartaria, and ancient knowledge and wisdom that's been handed down through the ages, and who has had access to that information. Okay, now there's a famous parable, a story about King Solomon was supposed to be the wisest man that ever lived, and King Solomon apparently had access to this ancient wisdom, this ancient knowledge that that made him the smartest man in the world. Now, there was a story about King Solomon, and this proved his wisdom, that two women came to him with a child, and they were fighting over who was the mother of the child. Okay? So, in King Solomon, in all his wisdom, said, cut the baby in half and give the mothers each half, and then they'll be happy. Right? So, the moral of the story is, the real mother, well, the fake mother who was claiming the child was hers when it really wasn't, was like, yes, great, that's a good solution. We'll both get half, or we'll be equal. Whereas the real mother said, well, I don't want the child to be harmed, so I'd rather the other woman, who is not the mother, have the child rather than the child be harmed. And then King Solomon said, well, I now award the child to the woman who didn't want the child harmed, because you're obviously the mother because you wouldn't want the child harmed. Okay? A little bit of reverse psychology there, but if you see by that action alone, it is no empathy, just pure logic. Pure logic. Okay, logic says that if we cut the child in half, then it's both equal, and hopefully the real mother will not want the child to be harmed. Pure logic, no empathy whatsoever. Okay, now we've seen this represented before in Dr. Spock in Star Wars, or Star Trek rather. Sorry for all those Trekkies out there. Dr. Spock was pure logic. Was pure logic. No empathy, no emotions, pure logic. And we're sold on the idea that pure logic is the answer to everything. Now, I've been speaking to my work colleagues and people around me and asking them the question, what's more important to you, logic or emotion? And every single person said emotion. Of course it's emotion. Emotion, that drives everything. Now, why is that important? Why is emotion and empathy important? Because we all, and I'll guarantee you, anybody who's watching this, ask yourself that question. What's more important? What's the most important thing to you, do you think, or to the world and yourself? Is it logic or emotion? Now, ask yourself that question. Ask people around you what's the most important. And I'll guarantee you, probably 90% of the people around you will say it's emotion is the most important, because we all run on emotions. And how we feel about things is what we're more likely to do. Now, I've spoken about The Secret before. If you haven't seen The Secret or read the book, have a look at it. It's very, very good. It changed my life. And in there, it talks about the universe, the world, the reality, if that's what you want to call it, that we live in, is run by emotions. Now, our emotions are our guideposts, our signposts, if you like, to say whether we're living right. So, you're doing something. Does it feel good? Yep, great. Well, you must be doing the right thing. Does it feel bad? Well, yeah, it does. So that's probably not the right way to go then, because your emotion guides you on your journey. Okay, you with me on that? So if emotion is more important to us, the average person who goes through their life, and it's the most important thing, obviously logic comes into how we make decisions, because logic is important, right? But if we take emotion out of those decisions, then where are we? Now, obviously, as humans, in this reality, this game, this simulation, whatever we're going to call it, Emotions drive us. And the people who are running the show know that. And they know how to trigger your emotional state. They know how to trigger your emotions. I've said before, we've spoken about this a lot of times. We're talking about social media and the media in general. Have a look at the way that things are reported in the media. Let's talk about Ukraine and Russia for a moment. Okay? Have a look at the reporting on Ukraine. What's the reporting? Women in a birthing hospital, in a maternity hospital, right? Women and children with cancer, and this is about Russia invading Ukraine. Okay, it's all about women and children, innocent people. Have a look at the reporting. Why is it reported that way? To trigger your emotions, to get you to have an emotional response to that. Okay, now I've also spoken about emotional response as well, and triggering negative emotions, which produces a negative emotional output, which is something that how to speak about this without sounding insane. Beings is the easiest way I can put it. Feed on negative emotion. It's called louche. Check it out. Louche, I think. Louche. Feed on that in negative emotion. So the media and social media is presented in such a way to trigger your emotions. Now, if you know that you can trigger an emotional response and get people to go a certain way, to react a certain way, if you want to get people to move in a certain direction, then emotionally trigger them to move in that direction through the images and the videos that you're seeing. Okay? Now, this is all done. The media is controlled by a very small number of companies. The politicians are controlled by think tanks. Okay, think tanks. We have the Trilateral Commission. We have the Bilderberg Group. You have the World Economic Forum. All think tanks. Pure logic. No emotion. No empathy. Pure logic. We have to, like, for instance, one of the things, we have too many people in the world. We have too many people. What are we going to do? Logic. No empathy. All right, we need to get rid of most of them to make sure that we can survive. Egocentric, remember? No empathy. All about me. So, if you have a bunch of psychopaths and sociopaths, how do they get to these positions? How do they stay there in positions where they actually have the power to influence this reality, this world, so that they benefit, that they win, and that you always lose? Now, this is why I spoke about my story in the beginning here. If you consider, how do you find psychopaths and sociopaths that are going to come on board? They're going to come on board to your agenda and help you implement it and keep it going as it gets injected into the public psyche. Now, if we go back to the school children and we start doing IQ tests and personality tests on school children, have you ever done an IQ and personality test? No? Have a look. Go and do one. You can do them online. They're wonderful. It makes you feel good about yourself. Or it doesn't. Now, one of the things in IQ tests, in a personality test, they usually come together, IQ and personality tests. I've done a bunch of them, a lot. There's a question that's in there, and it's asked 3 or 4 different ways. So they're essentially asking the same question in a different way, right? So one of the questions is, do you like to hurt small animals? Okay? So this is one of those sociopath, psychopath questions to bring you into that, where do you fit in the spectrum of being a psychopath, sociopath, or normal? Quote, normal. Like, you know, to be considered crazy in a world that's this messed up is actually a compliment. So I relish the fact that people think I'm insane. I do. I think it's wonderful because people have a low expectation if they think you're insane. So and people have an even lower expectation if they know you're insane. So just bear that in mind as you go through your day. Okay. So it is one of those questions, and it's asked 4 or 5 times during the personality test. Okay. Do you like to hurt small animals? So it's weeding out those sociopaths, psychopaths early on. Now, if you know that people have a tendency for lack of empathy, and you can capture that at an early age, and you can siphon them off into school for gifted children, then you can start to implement, thinking into those children. Okay? Now, the next stage of the process, the next part of it, if you will, there's a lot of things that are being introduced into the normal curriculum for school children. Okay? Very much like Marxist viewpoints, socialism, communism, and very much so into the university age students. Because university age students, as we all know, as they've always been, the youth energy, the power of the youth energy has the power to drive movements forward. Back in the 60s, we had the love movement, where people were smoking a bunch of weed and taking a bunch of drugs and free love and all that kind of jazz, trying to end the wars. But there was a lot of LSD back then. Coming from where? It just popped up out of nowhere? No. Where did it come from? And who was experimenting with it? Military. Shh, don't tell anyone. Shh. Why would they do that? Why would they use LSD, psychoactive drugs, to influence the university students? I don't know. Now, if you know that if you can take these children and put them into schools, they're gifted, or even better, university, like I say, into university, the Ivy League colleges that everyone, I went to Harvard, I went to Yale, I went to, all these kind of Cambridge and all these top schools, Ivy League schools. It's all about the perception, the image, the class, it's all about this class system that is based around your intelligence, where you went to school, and who you associate with. What you do for a job, of course, because your job defines who you are. I can't even say that with a straight face. It's ridiculous. Of course it's ridiculous. If you want to talk about the people's worth, for instance, let's go down the road of people's worth and their job, okay? Now, everyone likes to raise up and praise Albert Einstein, okay? Oh, Albert Einstein, one of the smartest people that's ever lived, blah, 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 right? What did Albert Einstein do for a job before he became renowned as the person who came up with the equation for E equals MC squared? What was he doing? He was working in a patent office, okay? So your job doesn't define you, your intelligence doesn't define you, your IQ doesn't define you, you define you. Now, if you see what's happening with the universities with this real left-wing, right, real far left, like left-wing, right-wing, it's the same bird, it doesn't really matter, it's all part of the political bullshit game. But what happens is you can channel that energy, that anger, that youthful energy into a way that isn't beneficial for people. This Extinction Rebellion movement, BLM, all these people have been drawn into these movements based on emotion. Now, the people who are triggering these emotional responses are running the game from think tanks like Bilderberg, World Economic Forum, Trilateral Commission. There's lots of these think tanks that are based in pure logic to get people to go in a certain direction. They trigger our emotional state, our empathy. Now, and when we're saying they, this is the question I keep on getting. Oh, Chris, it's a big conspiracy. You keep on talking about this big conspiracy and they and them. And, Yeah, we're not talking pronouns, by the way, here. You're not talking they and them, and you're always talking about them like there's a group of people that are running the world. Yeah, there is. Yeah, there really is. And they're not the names like we all talk about, Klaus Schwab and who's that other Hungarian loser? Victor, no, not Victor Orban. I can't even think of his name now. He's a horrible human being. I'm not even sure he's human. But anyway, but this is the thing. It's all based in pure logic. What is his name? Damn it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If it comes to me, I'll tell you. But these are the kind of people that make these decisions based in pure logic and no empathy whatsoever that are going to affect us all. And if you have a look at the World Economic Forum's agendas and the Agenda 21 coming from the UN, who wants to have a world government based from the UN. Unrepresentative, completely unvoted for, just completely separate and say, we're going to tell you how to live based on logic. And then we're going to trigger your emotional state to get you to act and do things in a certain way that go against your best interests. But because we're all based in in empathy and our emotional center, then because we're triggered that way, that's the way we go. So we are being corralled into things that won't benefit us through our emotions. Okay? We all are. Every single one of us. And it's being done through the mechanisms of the media, social media, government, all of these things that are in place because it's run by sociopaths and psychopaths that are found and maneuvered and trained to be that way from a very early age through the system and the structure of the education system and the way that it's set up to recognize lack of empathy, sociopathy and psychopathy, to bring them into this thinking, pure logic, no emotion, no empathy way of running the world. And we're all sitting here hoping that somebody else is going to do something to save us all. We're waiting for a savior. I know people like to point at Trump and say, well, he's going to save us. But at the end of the day, I like certain people doing certain things. I like that, certain people are stepping up and doing things. But at the end of the day, it rests with us to be able to decide how we want to live. Now, we can't do that if we don't recognize that there's a problem with how the world is being run through this pure logic, no empathy, and no emotional input. We have to recognize that before we can do anything else, before we can move forward, before we can live in a state that's going to not only benefit us, but make the world a better place to live in without a bunch of psychopaths running the world. Now, what do we do? What do we do? Firstly, recognize that you're being manipulated every single moment of your day through the messaging, through social media, through all these platforms, through everything that you're coming into contact with, news, everything. People are going to trigger your emotions because they are triggered. And it's a knock-on effect. There's this whole waterfall of and doesn't stop. And it won't stop until these psychopaths who are running the world get their way. We have a chance to put a stop to this. All we have to do is just ignore what they're doing and say, no, I'm not going along with it. We have to put our foot down and say no, and we have to recognize that we're being manipulated in order for it to stop. And then we have to try and educate people on what's going on, because if you don't, you're going to fall victim to it. I'm a victim of it, the same as everybody else, but I don't want to live in victimhood. I don't want to keep that perpetration of this whole idea of I'm a victim going on, because I'm not. I have a choice. I've made my choices. And I refuse to bow down to the programming. I refuse to give in. I'm not going to give away my power to a psychopath or a sociopath to tell me how to live and what to do. It's up to you to decide. Do you want to live in a way that doesn't benefit you or your family, your finances, your food, your everything, the way that you live, the way if your children go to school, how they interact with each other, how we interact with each other. Do you want to live the way that these psychopaths are telling us to cut yourself off from everyone, don't go outside, don't talk to people, don't trust anyone? Or do you want to live in a world where we can come together and create beautiful things that are going to benefit the world and make us all live together better? Or do you want to go down the other route where we're living in a psychopath running the show, nutcases running the asylum? It's time to choose. And the choice is yours. I can't make it for you, but it's time to choose. So if you think this is worthwhile, share it with people. If you don't. If you like it, hit the like button. If you really like what I'm doing, hit the subscribe button. Stay with me because I've got some really interesting content coming up for you. But that's it for today. So like I say at the end of all my videos, go out into the world, do good, and be good. You can change the world with the way that you think, the way that you act, and the way that you interact with people. And the stuff that you share influences other people and how they think. So what are you sharing? What are you doing? What are you speaking about? What are you thinking about? Examine that. And maybe, just maybe, we can take back control from the psychopaths and sociopaths in this world and bring back some emotion and empathy and love to guide the world in a better direction. It's up to us all. Time to choose. Right, love you all. Have a wonderful day. Look forward to seeing you real soon. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. Ciao for now.